Hello and welcome guys, my name is Badger and welcome to another glorious painting video. And in today's video we're going to be painting up the Sons of Horus. So without further ado, let's just get stuck into it. And this is the final miniature that you'll end up with if you follow along today. I was really happy with this. I did struggle a bit with the green colour, but in the end I managed to figure it out how I would like it to look. There are a couple of options we can go over for it, but this is what I went with. Started off with, as usual, black primer. Oh, slightly went out of focus there. However, moving on, we start off with Lupercal green, thinned down as per usual. Coverage for this paint is pretty horrendous, so I do indeed end up using a couple of coats for this. Obviously, goes without saying, you can do it via an airbrush, but this is a brush-only tutorial, apart from the black primer stage. I will say that I probably thinned it down slightly too much, but that's not a huge issue. It's just going to take a bit longer than required. We're going to get this on and wait for the first layer of paint to dry. Okay, as you can see, that first layer of paint dried and it is very, very transparent. Obviously, I did thin it down too much, but I was also not wanting streaky bits of paint everywhere. So, trying to find that balance. We're going on with the second coat. This coat was, I think, slightly thicker. The room was very warm, so it was kind of drying out a little bit. And as a result, the paint was a bit thicker. So it's going on a bit better than the previous coat, thankfully. All right, this is going to be our third and final base coat for this Lupercal green. It's going on nice and smoothly. As you can see, the previous two layers have really helped this. I could have probably sped this stage up a little bit by going on with a larger brush, but unfortunately, it's just how I like to paint. And there we go. That about tidies up this leg before we move on to the next color where we're going to completely overcoat this paint. So, Sons of Horus green is the color I have chosen. You could use Cabalite green. I have seen people use Cabalite green as an option, but I think I preferred this sort of slightly more desaturated green. Okay, finally, we are getting all of those armor plates completely covered with this paint. It's going to need a couple of coats. This paint is... coverage isn't great. It's not as bad as the previous color, of course, but it's going to require at least a couple of coats to get a nice sort of even finish. All right, that was the first layer over and done with. We've got to, as you can see, there are streaks, but that is what the second and third layer are going to be for. All right, that's our second coat done. And moving on to our third coat, once that previous layer is dried, as you can see, it's dried nice and opaquely. This final coat should be enough and get us where we want to. Okay, so this is the third and final coat, as I said. And let's just get this on and wait for it to dry. Here we go. That's looking pretty good. Obviously, you've got to wait for it to dry. However, first of all, doing the undersuit, as always. Now, using Skaven Blight Dinge. Going to run that into all of the undersuit parts. We are going to run this right up to the armor and also around that front bit between the sort of groin area. And I am going to run a bit of paint in there just to be on the safe side. Quick second coat, just to tidy things up a little bit, make things a bit more opaque before moving on to the next stage. All right, just wrapping up that back of the knee area. And now moving on to Runelord, which is, of course, what we're going to use to shade into all those little recesses, those wrinkles of the undersuit. And where also the undersuit sort of comes up against the armor plate. So I like to make sure there's a decent bit of Runelord around those parts. Okay, making sure to get the inner part of the knee. I have forgotten this in the past. So don't be like me. Remember to do this part. It is a bit of a nightmare to get to sometimes. All right, now we've got Coelia? Greenshade, however you pronounce that word. I'm going to use this as a panel line. I'm not going to coat the entire surface with this color, although I am doing all of the toe things right there. But we're going to be going back with the Sons of Horus green to tidy stuff up. So, although this is a panel shade, I'm being a bit rough with it as well, as you can see. Making sure, as long as it gets into all of the sort of, well, surprisingly enough, the panel lines, all the grooves, all the recesses and crevices, that is the important part. As you can see, there it is. It's all dried, except for that, probably by that bit right by the top of the knee armor right there. It does look a bit wet still. But that is the sort of deep shadow that we want. This is the right color, and we have to do a bit of tidy up in the next stage. Okay, back to Sons of Horus green, or Cabalite green, depending on which one you went with. We're going to use this to tidy up any of the sort of bits which ran away from us when we weren't paying attention. Tidying up the back of those panels there where some of the shade ran. Take a bit of time and tidy it up as much as you would like. Okay, and that is the result that we've got. I'm pretty happy with this. There's a bit of a streak down that right. Not anymore. Okay, I just went over it. Well done, Badger. Yeah, as I said, now is a good time to sort of fix up any little bits and pieces which you don't think look quite as you'd like them, before moving on to the sort of highlighting stage which is coming up. And here we go, is our final armor panel. It's looking pretty snazzy and how I would like it, I think. I don't think we got any issues going on. And that does mean we can move on to the next stage, which is of course edge highlighting. We use Sybarite green. You can go a step further than this if you really want. I do not though, because I think this next stage is taking it to where I would like it. So we're going to run this along the edges of as many of these panels as we can possibly do it. Paint is watered down a smidgen so that it runs off the brush smoothly and it doesn't flood the surface of the miniature, which would be a disaster. And we're using the side of the brush to hit the edges of the armor panels. Obviously, that's not always possible. And in those times, you got to use the point of the brush, but you can be pretty quick with this. Although there are lots of armor panels to do, as you can see, holding it at an angle so it hits the edges of the panel, it does really make it somewhat easier. Getting the front of these armor panels right here with the side of the brush, getting that little bobbly bit there, and any other little panels that we've missed. We do have to get the toes, the armored toes, that sort of top plate of the boot as well. All right, that is looking pretty good, I think, to me. Some of these edges are going to need a second coat, so if required, go around, do a second coat of edge highlighting. Take a bit longer, but sometimes it's definitely needed. Lovely jubbly. And now we can move on to our next stage, which is, can you guess? Yeah, it's Abaddon black. That's what we're going to use. We're going to use this. I'm going to get the shoulder pads. We will do the black edge highlighting, etc., etc. But make sure we got a nice even coat of Abaddon black. Tidy up any of that sort of previous disaster that we've got on there from painting all of that green. Obviously watered down, couple of coats. Going to be very quick. Don't forget the undersides of the shoulder pads as well. Something I've done many times. Okay, now we're going to use Eshin grey. We're going to use this as our first chunky edge highlight for the black. It's going to run it around all of the edges to begin with, as though we were going to use it as an edge highlight. And then we're just going to make that line a bit fatter. I just like to make sure that the edges got a decent amount of paint on there and it's going to be nice and opaque for future stages. As you'll have noticed, we have also got the shoulder straps painted black as well. Normally I'd paint them metallic color, but I decided we'd just go ahead and paint them black for once. So we're just going to use this Eshin grey as a sort of chunky edge highlight for these shoulder strap things. And there we go, making that edge highlight a slightly bit chunkier. Just running the edge of the tip of the paintbrush along that edge highlight to sort of make it a bit fatter. And here we go, making that line a bit fatter as well. Just being very, attempting to be very careful. Make that line roughly even, not too sort of wibbly wobbly. I think we did an okay job of it in the end. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good and ready for the next stage, which of course is Dawnstone. This is going to be our proper edge highlight, so we're going to just make sure it's nicely onto the brush, and we are going to run it just along the edge, just like that. Use the edge of the brush, hold it at an angle to the edge, and just draw it along. A lovely smooth edge highlight. It's a beautiful thing. In fact, these are the colors. I do a Bolter tutorial. I use, in that one, I believe I used Vallejo colors, but you can use black, Eshin grey, and Dawnstone grey to get a sort of similar effect for the Bolter casing, but just using GW colors. Okay, that's the shoulder pad. You could, and obviously we got to go and do all of those shoulder straps as well. You could at this point, I'm not going to be doing it, but if you wanted to take this miniature up a step, you could add a tiny bit of white to the Dawnstone grey to do sort of very small edge highlights in certain places as well. I don't really bother, especially for line characters, line miniatures, even not characters. We're already spending quite a lot of time, and for a squad, this would just add even more time to the total finish. Okay, and there is our finished black shoulder pad. We wanted to get that done before this stage, which is obviously the gold Retributor armor. I usually, as I've said many times, I put a bit of paint right on the very tip end of the rivet And then I sort of rotate that gold around until it hits the sort of surface of the shoulder pad itself. It takes a bit of time, but that is why we ended up painting the black first, because then we can go around when we make mistakes doing this with a bit of black paint and tidy things up quite quickly. Okay, and as I said, there's the Abaddon black to tidy it up with if required. If you don't require, then we can just go straight on with the Agrax Earthshade. We're just going to use that to dull this gold down, to sort of add a bit more brown to it instead of take out some of that yellow of it. Make sure it runs all the way onto the shoulder pad, so you can be quite heavy-handed with it. If required, after this, you can always tidy up any further disasters with some black paint. And then finally, once that's dried, we're going to move on to Runelord Brass. I'm just going to show you this brush to show you the nightmare that I'm currently working with. I really will have to get a new brush soon. I promise. Anyway, now you've enjoyed that. Have the miniature sort of facing the ceiling. I guess it's, you know, standing up, so it's, as it might be in real life. And just paint the upward facing surfaces. The surfaces pointing towards the ceiling with the Runelord Brass. That's basically the only way I can describe it. I'm sure there's a better way, but right now my brain is going, bleh. I think that makes sense. So, as you can see, that Runelord Brass is on. I think along with the golden Agrax, that Runelord Brass really works out quite nicely. I don't know what I was pointing at there, but we're going to go with Screamer Pink, folks. Do you know why? Do you know why we're going with Screamer Pink? Can you guess? Can you see what I'm zooming in on? Can you see what I'm focusing on? Everything but the eyes. Yes, we are going to go with pink eyes. I think at this point I was wanting to paint a different lens color, and I thought, what better color than Screamer Pink? One of my all-time favorite paints, and we're going to go with pink lenses. So let's see how this turns out. The lenses have previously been tidied up with a bit of Abaddon black, as you can see. And we're going to run that Screamer Pink into the eye lens. We want a bit of black, ideally kind of framing the pink and also at the very outer corner. Now we are going to move on to Pink Horror. We're going to sort of see that pink we've already got down there. We want to half fill it with this color. We are going to run that from the center of the helmet to round about there. Apparently just in one brush stroke. What an absolute wizard I am. Look at it. Absolutely stunning work in one brush stroke. I amazed even myself, which is quite amazing. Okay, and then finally, Fulgrim Pink. Once that previous layer has dried, we're going to get that sort of in the very center quarter, I guess, of the entire lens. Just right about kind of that much. Maybe a bit more if you really want. It's really up to you. But then we're going to use White Scar, as always, to get the very corner glint of the lens. So make sure it's thinned down enough, but you certainly don't want it flooding the lens. And we will eventually get that in. I know some people use a squashed cocktail stick to sort of put a dot of paint on, and that does work. I like to risk it with this brush, though. We get there in the end. Look at that lovely stuff. Absolutely lovely. I like that pink lens. I think I'm going to use it more. Here is our finished miniature, as you can see. Let me get it slightly zoomed out for you. And hopefully you won't get motion sickness from the wiggling of the camera. Yeah, as you can see, there it is. I'm very happy. That initial Sons of Horus, that Lupercal green was a bit of a nightmare. You probably might be able to skip that stage entirely and just do a few more coats of Sons of Horus green, but that's entirely up to you. I got to this stage. I'm really happy with it. The leather strap probably needs a bit more work, but this is just a sort of tabletop standard as far as I'm concerned. And I got to say, I'm really happy with the green and really happy with that pink lens. I'm definitely going to be using them in a future army, once I decide on that army, of course. Maybe Black Templars. Yeah, who knows? What do you think, folks? Do you like this? Are you happy? Folks, thanks so much for hanging out with me today as we have painted up this Sons of Horus. That green was a bit of a struggle for me, but I think we got there in the end, at least for a decent tabletop standard. Now, folks, if you've made it this far and you haven't subscribed, I would love it if you could potentially subscribe. We are moving towards 1,000 subscribers here on YouTube, and it would mean a great deal to me if you could do that. Saying that, next week's video, we will be working on the Word Bearers. That should be dropping on Wednesday as usual. So make sure you've hit the notification, and thanks for hanging out.